On April 2nd, the Trump administration announced their latest set of tariffs, including a 10% baseline tariff and higher rates on certain countries, including both allies and adversaries. Barath, there is so much to unpack with this. Can you explain these tariffs and how they calculated them?
There are broadly two parts to the tariff action. So the first is a universal tariff of 10%, which means that if you're importing or exporting any goods to the US at all, you will now have to pay 10%. So what this does is this increases the floor on the prices you will have to pay. The second part of this is a reciprocal tariff. Now this has been targeted at roughly 60 countries who have been identified as serial abusers of trade with the US. What this means is that they either have a large trade surplus with the US or they've been identified as having unfair trade practices by the US. In terms of calculation, on the other hand, the administration has opted for speed. They've taken the US trade deficit with a certain country in, say, 2024, and they've divided that by the imports into the US by X country. So let's take, for example, the EU. The EU had roughly a $235 billion deficit with the US last year, and they imported $605 billion worth of imports into the US. And so if you divide that, you have roughly 39%. After that, the US applies what they call a discounted rate, so they halve that number, and so you get a 20% tariff.
So what is the strategy behind implementing tariffs like this?
The first half is they think that the US has been taken for a ride by the countries, and so now they have to retaliate, to restore and undo decades of damaging trade liberalization, and importantly try to pull back manufacturing to the US. The second one is a more transactional reason, which is to generate revenue for the planned tax cut later this year.
So what will the economic outcomes be both here in the US and around the world?
In terms of global impact, there's going to be stark regional disparities and who's affected. Regions like Asia and Africa will be worst hit. I think importantly, if you look beyond just regional numbers, a lot of developing economies will be badly hit. You have, for example, in Myanmar, which has been suffering under a military junta for many years and it still has barely recovered from the recent 7.7 Richter scale earthquake. So they're going to be crushed by this. As for the US, we've done some modeling, and in terms of macroeconomic impacts, this might shave up to 1% of the US GDP, which equates to over $300 billion. Prices will increase, so inflation will increase by roughly 9.9%, but real wages don't keep up, and they will lag by roughly 1%. So what we see is the economy will shrink, inflation will go up, wages will not keep up and go down, and all this in the presumptive aim of renewing the American economy.